So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to 2018, although I don't think this will actually be the first video I release in 2018. This is the first one that I'm recording in the current year anyway. So yeah, I hope that this year will be good to you, and I hope that your festive season was a pleasant one. If you don't care about all of this stuff, of course, you can just skip to the timestamp where the battle starts in the description below, as well as the links to the Discords and to the ModDB. First thing you might notice is that I have turned off Sweet FX, and I'm curious to see whether that will improve the frame rate. If it does, then I will basically disable Sweet FX from here on in, because I am sick and tired of the frame rate being affected adversely by it, if that is indeed what is happening. So yeah, it doesn't look as nice, but hopefully it will be much smoother. And on Hobbiton, of course, which is the perfect place for a sort of whimsical, sort of holiday-esque sort of fight, although, you know, it is just a regular fight on Hobbiton really, but it was a New Year's fight, I believe. But yeah, I mean, obviously the invaders are here to try and steal the second breakfasts and the 11s, and the defenders are here to try and keep them for themselves, as it were. So we'll go through the defenders first of all, and there are three defending armies, starting off with Arcturus over here, who has got the Kingdom of Rune as his faction. He's got, I don't know why Rune would be invited to Hobbiton for festive celebrations. I guess maybe all has been forgiven. But we have some clansmen down here in the corner with stakes all around, as well as some runic swiftblades backing them up. And then as we go further up the hill, we'll start to see more elites. So we've got the Carmel's Chosen, we've got the mounted battle-ready Dunedain from Eriador, who's played by Master Blaster. We've also got some Bree Militia in front of these Loke Scion Rim. Also the runic cavalry force of Innas Rim and Carmel's Dragon Knights are also present on the battlefield, as well as the Loke Gamp Rim and the Loke Flag Rim. In addition to the Hobbitry at Arms, the Hobbitry at Arms are obviously not going to do a great deal in this fight, but they will at least they'll do their best, and you can't ask for more than that. And we've got some Loke Flag Rim and more Gamp Rim, as well as some Nar Rim, and then at the top here we have the Trebuchet from Eriador, as well as some Banderbrass Archers. And again, the runic line here at the back is very strong, and you know, the attacker at the back usually starts off pretty close, so that's, you know, a good sort of construction of the runic line. And then we've got more Eriador forces over here with the heavy swords and spears, Dunedain Rangers and some Dunedain Bodyguards. Very fast cavalry, very similar in many ways to the Serpent Bodyguard of Harad. And then the final player is Enxfitz, playing as Arnor, and he's got some dismounted Dunedain Knights, some dismounted Arthedain Knights, so he's covering this defence over here. A lot of Arthedain man-at-arms, supported by some battle-ready Dunedain as well. There's also some Arnor Gate Guards hidden in the trees, and some Dunedain Rangers down here, as well as some Ballistae, and some more cavalry in the shape of these Arnor Knights. They don't have HP, but they can still do a lot of damage potentially. Arnor Pikemen being supported by the Greenway Guard. So Rune and Arnor sort of taking one half each, and then Eriador supporting both sides, it seems. There's also some Black Waltz hidden in the trees over here, potentially very deadly. So now let's have a look at the attackers, starting off over here, I believe, with General WVPM playing as Mordor. It wouldn't be an assault on Hobbiton if Mordor weren't attacking. Trying to ransack the hobbit holes, and we have some Moran on bows. We've got a lot of fodder here at the front, of course. Also, though, the lesser Balrogs looking mean and menacing here at the front. We've also got some more orc fodder. There's some Numenorean Shadow Guard in there, I can see them. But I believe there are also some Temple Guardsmen, indeed there are. There's also a Mordor Catapult, which could be potentially very good on the blobs of defenders. Lots of Moranon units, Halberds and Maulers, and then also some regular Orc Maulers and Raiders. Then at the back we've got a smattering of elites as well. Some Numenorean Shield Guard, some Sauron's Will, and some Morgul Chosen. Then over here, in fact, we will probably lose track of these guys, but maybe they can be match winners in the end. The Nazgul. Don't see them too often. Most people prefer the much more dependable Temple Inquisitors, but the Nazgul are here. Now we've got Tundra's Fox playing as the Dwarves. Khazad-dûm will be their own faction in the next patch, but I believe he's got a sort of Khazad-dûm inspired army, because he's got some Khazad sentries and some guards of Khazad-dûm. He's also got some Dwarven miners. Most of his unit, I don't think he's got any Ironfoot units except for one. I might be wrong about that. But his primary infantry line is made up of Khazad warriors instead of the Ironfoot warriors. Khazad Orc Hunters, the stakes facing backwards to try and prevent rear charges on their positions. Some merchant militia over here. A lot of miners, so he's gone for a much more wide approach, which on Hobbiton could work out, because it is not exactly the most orthodox siege. There are no walls. There's also some Khazad sentries over here, as well as some Dwarven noblemen. Then over on the side over there, some Khazad Orc Hunters and some Ironfoot crossbowmen. Then the third attacker, we have Pizza Maker 90 playing as Isengard. Dunland clansmen just out here on their own, but the primary bulk of his army is Uruk-hai, so he's got pikemen, he's got raiders, he's got archers, he's got quite a lot of infantry, he's got some reavers as well. And then as we go over here, sort of his elite section, he's got some catapults, he's got, well, a catapult, he's got some trolls of the White Hand, unit of warg riders to try and protect against that cavalry, 1 unit of crossbows, and 2 units of Nazkai. And then the final army, the opposite to the dwarves really, going for a much more quality focused approach, we have Umbar, played by Seir Argon. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but he's got some Abrazanim Nadu Barwiv, he's got some Corsair Savages, Naru Naaru Royal Guardsmen, he's also got these Belagir Halberds, sort of his primary line is made up of them, as well as some Harbingers of Castamere, Castamere's Chosen, Belagir Footmen, some Castamere's Rangers, the Royal Archers, and the Warlords of Umbar. Having said that though, as we get going, Umbar is in a rather awkward position. He has chosen a quality focused army, but as you can see at the top of that hill, Rune and Eriador have got their skirmishers up there, so it's going to be a pretty rough advance for Umbar if they're able to get much done at all. We can see over there that the Carmel's Dragon Knights and the Innis Rim sort of peeling off, and I believe we're going to see the same from Eriador as well, because they do have their Dunedain bodyguard, and yes, their Dunedain bodyguard is moving, so they need to be careful they're not pincered. Having said that, the Trebuchet isn't actually firing on Umbar, it's sort of turned around and it's going to be attacking Mordor, because the Lesser Balrogs are already into the fray. And the Balrogs are already pushing their way through, and these Balchoth Sapphire Bladesmen need to be careful, because they are a potentially very strong Javelin unit, which could be used to kill these Balrogs, but not in melee. They're going to need to be throwing their deadly Javelins. The Clansmen are going to be no match for the Balrogs, especially not when the main Mordor engagement comes here. The Mounted Battle Ready Dunedain sort of need to get out of there before they're caught in melee by the Uruks. As we can see, the Runic player sort of peeling off, and in fact, if we look on the minimap up there, we can see that this Eriador cavalry, they're not going for Umbar at all really, they're actually leaving in B, which could be a bit of a respite that Umbar needs. Instead, we have the Dunedain bodyguards charging into the Trolls of the White Hand, but the Trolls of the White Hand, it looked like they were in loose formation because they were very far apart from one another. One of them does fall, but ultimately these horsemen need to be very careful, because they're in melee with Trolls, and now the Wargs are going to be committed, so they need to get out of there. Fortunately, they are a very fast cavalry unit, so they're quite slippery. They're going to be able to get out of there without too much of an issue. Meanwhile, we can see here the Isengard advance, moving forward, pikemen, as well as the Raiders. The Raiders, though, are going to struggle a little bit, as we just sort of, I'm just going to turn the speed down a little bit as we get into the guts of this fight over here. The Raiders aren't going to be able to do much in the way of damage to these more elite Arthedain men-at-arms, but if they can get those pikemen in there, it's an atrocious battle that they could do quite well in. Isengard need to take advantage of their numbers and really start wrapping around Arnor, and hopefully then the support of the dwarves can come forth. Meanwhile, as we go over to the other side of the map, we can see that Mordor has definitely taken the aggressive stance here, which I like, because it's one thing that you're really going to have in your favour. And actually you can see here, the clansmen that were in this corner down here were just not able to hold, and Mordor are now pouring in through the gap that the Balrogs have punched through here. The clansmen are running for the hills, the Dragon's Wrath guildsmen are sort of coming forward, artillery is flying on both sides. You can see that artillery probably shouldn't be going for the clansmen, should be going for something a little bit more meaty. You can see here that Mordor could even go in through this way as well, and that would buckle Rune's defence almost entirely. There's a bit of friendly fire there, which is something they definitely don't need. Umbar, on the other hand, is taking a much more sedate approach, which is something they definitely shouldn't be doing. With their elite army, they need to be getting right up into the face of the Runic line. I mean, it's not exactly the most appealing prospect to try and charge in over here, but ultimately, if they just stand there, they're just going to let their elite units get peppered down more and more by the forces. And especially seeing as how Isengard and Mordor have been very aggressive, you need to pressure on all sides when you're attacking. Meanwhile, what's going on over here? We can actually see that the Corsair Savages were sent up on their own, which is never going to be a good thing for them. The Corsair Savages, I mean, they're pretty good when you support them, but they just don't have the survivability or the staying power to hack it in a sustained melee, particularly not when they're being recharged by a pretty elite unit of cavalry. These Dunedain bodyguards have taken a fair amount of damage though, although I think the vast majority of that was in their escape from the Trolls and the Wargs, less so from the Corsair Savages. Oops. My bad. But you can also see that the Uruk-hai infantry is now going forward. The Uruk-hai infantry is a much more even match for the Arthedain men-at-arms. There's also Uruk Reavers in there, so the Reavers should also do a pretty decent job. They're chasing away the Arnor Knights at the moment by the looks of things. In fact, the Arnor Knights, the lack of HP on these guys is going to mean they're going to struggle. Also, using these Dunland clansmen as a sort of buffer is a good idea, and they're actually chasing them with the crossbows. keeping these crossbows in and amongst the lower tier unit to sort of shield them is... Protecting your crossbows is going to be very important as Isengard, and they're doing a decent job of that so far. Having said that, the dwarves are now on the scene over here. So it's all very, very chaotic. The dwarven miners sort of charging into the rear of these Arnor pikemen. And actually I'm going to need to slow this down again just so that I can sort of keep track of everything that's going on. Hobbiton is a map where everything happens very, very fast. These dwarven miners are coming forward en masse, but unfortunately for them, they're not going to really be able to punch through these Arnor pikemen with any sort of conviction, especially not when these Arnor knights are going to be rear charging them. Dwarven miners are better than sort of standard trash units from most other factions, other than the elves, of course, but they're still not going to really hack it against sort of like good solid mainline units, especially not like pikes that are in formation, although the pikes are sort of trying to sort of get out of the way so that the Arnor knights can do their work. But yeah, Tundra's Fox probably needs to send forward some more heavy duty support, but then most of his army was miners, so we'll see how that goes. Of course, the numbers advantage is very clearly in favour of the attackers here, so the defenders are going to need to hold against some pretty severe pressure. You can see that's a lot of Uruk-hai. There are battle-ready Dunedain in here now as well, but the line for Arnor is looking decidedly thinner than the Isengard one, so time will tell whether the quality of Arnor's troops can hold out. Umbar, on the other hand, is not really being targeted down too heftily, which might be a bit of a mistake on the defenders' part. They're sitting right there. The Trebuchet should really be targeting down some of those elite units. Getting some nice hits on the Harbingers of Castamere would really hobble Umbar's ability to affect the game later on. Mordor, on the other hand, is having much more success than Isengard is. We can see that these lesser Balrogs, they are starting to fall, but the carnage that they have wrought, and you can actually see over here the Morgul Chosen are moving forward, as well as the Nazgul. So Morgul Chosen and Nazgul, and Sauron's Will. There's a lot of elite forces, so Mordor is definitely not backwards in coming forwards. The Forest Shell captains are trying to hold the line, but even a unit of their quality is not going to be enough against this level of Mordor elites. The Nazgul, the Morgul Chosen, and the Sauron's Will all combining their efforts. There's also Tundra's Fox coming over here with more dwarves, the Guards of Khazad-dûm. Although up here, this section of line is going less well for Mordor. And again, that can probably be attributed to this cavalry, the Mounted Battle-Ready Dunedain, and I believe they're having to deal with some cavalry, the Innis Rim and the Dragon Knights. They didn't go for Umbar in the end, they instead peeled off, trying to go for Mordor. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, however, those axe throwers are going to be lethal if they get some volleys off into those Dragon Knights. But yeah, the cavalry for Rhûn definitely being a bit of an annoyance for Mordor, and the cavalry for Eriador sort of burrowing into this line over here. Mordor is going to need to send forward more men, or the dwarves are, because if they can sustain this assault, they may well break through, but if they run out of steam, then none of this will be worth it. We shall see. Meanwhile, if we look over here, again, Abrazani, Nadu Bawib, sort of in loose formation going forwards on their own. I think if Umbar was being very aggressive as well, particularly if he was coming over here to help Mordor, that would be the way to go. Sorry about that. But yes, we have the Dunedain bodyguards of Eriador are still alive, and the cavalry, actually there's some Grey Company over here as well that I missed. They can hide, I believe, as horse units. They and the Hashari Shadows can hide on horseback, which is, you know, masters of stealth indeed. You can actually see that these Morannon halberds have sort of come down this road over here, and they're starting to attack Arnor from the rear, but Morannon halberds are a decent unit. Very decent halberdier, but they're not going to be able to defeat dismounted Dunedain Knights. The Dunedain Knights are just going to be too tanky for them. And also there's another unit, I believe, of dismounted Dunedain Knights again. We can see that Númenorian Shield Guard and Khazad Warriors are coming across now. The Khazad Warriors were probably needed much sooner over here, to be fair. You know, the Dwarven Miners were just sort of singled out and shredded. There are actually some Númenorian Shield Guard in behind the lines. The Greenway Guards are holding them in place. Greenway Guards are AP, of course, but still. Low attack values on spears means the AP is not going to do a huge amount to units with hit points, but still, a bit of chip damage could be just what the Doctor ordered. These Khazad Warriors are moving forward now, though. In fact, let's go back to regular speed, I think. As you can see, the Khazad Warriors definitely much more suited to fighting Arnorian infantry. It's going to take more elite units to take on Dwarven mainline units from Arnor, certainly. And the AP on these guys will be very useful. And Dwarves, of course, when you put them into shield wall, they can push through pike formations more easily than most other factions can. It's an ability that the Blackwatch Legion also have. These Uruk-hai archers, meanwhile, are out of ammunition, it would seem, and they are in melee. They're sort of trapped behind enemy lines, surrounded on all sides by pikes. That catapult needs to be careful it doesn't get engaged with the pikes. Trolls are actually a good choice against pikes because they can override the pikeman's very powerful animation. We can see actually the Arnor Knights managing to get a good charge onto that catapult crew. And they're actually sending a unit of 100 Dunland clansmen routing. That could be a pretty key moment on this fight, to be honest with you, because it does mean that Arnor could win this flank. You can actually see that these Uruk-hai crossbows are firing. They're not actually taking a huge amount of damage, which is good for them. But we can see that Isengard's numbers are starting to overrun the Arnor line. The Arnor line was just too thin and long, and ultimately it looks like the numbers are going to pay dividends here. So Isengard are starting to make inroads. Meanwhile, on the other side, I would suggest that Mordor are actually going to start to run out of steam unless some of those Dwarven reinforcements arrive. You can see the Shadow Guard are there, Khazad-dûm reclaimers, but you can see that this side over here, Rune and Eriador together are collapsing down the hill now as Mordor's flank starts to fall apart, and a lot of that can be attributed to the cavalry charges from the rear. I think the hammer and anvil has been pretty impressive in this battle.
Our general lies slain upon
There goes the Eriador general though, at the hands of miners no less. So he was in a unit of Forestshell captains, I believe. The Balrogs are still going pretty strong though. I mean, there's still 3 of them left, and considering they were the first unit that charged into battle for the attackers in this, of all of the units on any one of the attacking armies, they're still going strong, and they're still going for these Sapphire Bladesmen, which is a good choice. The Sapphire Bladesmen are a potentially very dangerous unit indeed. And we can see that these Forestshell captains starting to turn the tide a little bit over here. The Nazgul, there are still 10 of them over. The Nazgul are all still alive, but the Forestshell captains have done a decent amount of damage to the Morgul Chosen at least. But the Nazgul are going to be a bit of a problem. They are very difficult to kill unless you can single them out. So if Mordor manages to keep units around the Nazgul, this attack could be sustained. These crossbowmen, I believe they're out of ammunition. They've pulled out their butter knives and they're going for the Balrogs. But the miners are going to intercept them, I think. The miners, of course, are going to be able to beat basic runic crossbows in melee. Let's go and have a look over here, shall we? So it does look as though the cavalry is still running around. The Grey Company now taking on the mantle. What happened here? You can see that the Temple Guard, despite taking several charges, were able to sort of stand their ground and kill an awful lot of cavalrymen. They are, of course, I think they do have AP arrows. They are going to be one of the very few archer units which keep their AP arrows in the next patch, and I think their cost will be increased to reflect that. We have Tundra's Fox over here sort of keeping some of his reinforcements back. There are still 4 in this room, but the next time they charge in, it will probably be the last charge they make, so not really a huge deal for the defenders there. We can actually see these Bree militia holding their ground in the face of the Sauron's will, and actually victory seems certain for the Bree militia, although that probably comes more from the fact that they're fighting alongside Scion Rim. Meanwhile, if we look up here, this might be where the attacking cavalry starts to come into it, because a lot of the defending cavalry has been sort of expended, and this means that Umbar's patience may well pay off here, because the Warlords of Umbar are now the strongest cavalry unit left alive on the field. And there are actually some harbingers of Castamere, so finally Umbar is moving forward, making his move, coming to the aid of his ally, it would seem, although he has got to sort of change his trajectory there to try and meet the challenge of these Carmels Chosen. And the harbingers of Castamere, I mean, they have been sent forward on their own again, which is something that I definitely wouldn't recommend. Although Umbar has moved forward, we'll see how well they do. The Belagir Halberds defeat is a distinct possibility. There are also Castamere's Chosen in here, I believe. Actually, no, it's Rangers. So yeah, I mean, Umbar have moved forward, but again, it's not really the kind of army which would have worked in the sort of situation they started in. If I was dealt this hand as Umbar, I wouldn't have charged up the hill. I definitely probably, I would have either moved to meet up with Isengard or Mordor, or split my army to meet up with both, as the dwarves did. I think that would have been the way to go. The Grey Company, meanwhile, is harassing the Narun Aru Royal Archers. Grey Company fighting, bravely moving into a unit that's much more elite in melee than they are. The Trebuchet getting a decent hit on those miners. Meanwhile, let's go and have a look down here, shall we? Past the celebrations, we can actually see that there are... Oh, it's the Guards of Khazad-dûm moved in down here to support the Mordor Morannon Halberds, and the Guards of Khazad-dûm, definitely a superior heavy infantry unit to the dismounted Dunedain Knights. The AP, all important here. Only the Mithril Guard can boast more impressive melee stats for a sword and board unit than them. And then if we look over here, the dwarves continuing their advance. with the mighty Khazad warriors, although the Khazad warriors definitely not a good fit for the Black Wolves. The Black Wolves should be able to get a decent amount of damage done to them, provided they can avoid the skirmish fire, which is raining down all around them. And the Khazad Orc Hunters means that the dwarves have actually brought a pretty decent ranged force, and there are still some dwarves left in reserve. So we'll have a look at the percentages of kills. So there are much more of the attackers have died at this point in the battle, but the defenders, they're going to have to sort of really try and sustain that for longer than it looks like they're going to be able to in order to have victory here today. You can see that these Arnor Gate Guards holding their ground. The Arnor Gate Guards from the front in formation, of course, an extremely difficult unit to break down. And the Uruk-hai infantry is not going to be able to do that. And in fact, we can see that wrapping around there's a unit of Arnor pikemen. So they're sort of surrounded by pikes, this sort of area of Uruk-hai. In fact, if we look over here, we can see that Saruman is over here with some Nazkai. And there are actually some Dunedain Rangers moving in to try and tame the Nazkai. There are still 32 of them. Although I can only see Saruman. I can't see too many in the way of Nazkai infantry models. I guess they must be here though, blending in. But if we look up over here, the tide of battle has actually changed over here as well. So Isengard, it looked like they were going to be able to smash through the Arnorian lines, but the support of these Eriador units has turned the battle. And of course, fighting uphill does take a toll on your men. And they are now surrounded, so Isengard.
The enemy general lies dead.
Ooh, the Warlords of Umbar, that's a mistake. Charging into Lokgamp Brim. There's few places cavalry are made less welcome than in the arms of the Lokgamp Brim, and there are also stakes very close by. Meanwhile, the Umbar infantry is elite enough that they are starting to really wear down the runic pike wall. So we'll see if the elite Umbar infantry can sort of carry the day on this flank enough to be a factor later on in the battle. But again, we can see over here that the attackers are being surrounded in several places. The Belagir footmen broken and fighting to the death, surrounded by Flagrim. Flagrim are a very potent infantry unit, of course, but we shall see how this goes. And in fact, over here, you can see that there really are no victors over here. I mean, Mordor, you could say, there goes the Isengard general as well, so a lot of attacking generals are falling, but in fact, Mordor, in the end, it looks like they have claimed victory on this flank. The Harbingers of Castamere and the Warlords of Umbar, the support of them was in the end enough for drips and drabs of Mordor to claim victory. And who knows, that could be pretty significant because they do need to win on this flank. In fact, the Dragon Knights are still in effect, which means that the Dragon Knights, they are now going to be able to eclipse the Warlords of Umbar pretty easily as the strongest cavalry unit. And we can see that charging over the hills, the Carmel's Dragon Knights, dropping their lances. How many of these Castamere Harbingers can they kill? That was actually a pretty weak charge. Well, actually, it wasn't a pretty weak charge. They killed quite a few of them then. It looked weak. The Dragon Knights do need to get out of there, though. Some very elite units they're going to be facing. Merchant Militia are moving forward, so Tundra's Fox is sort of moving his units in. He's still got his crossbows, of course, but Mordor are largely fully committed at this point, I would suggest. There's also some miners coming up here. Going to be trying to come to the aid of his Umbar ally. The Nazgul are also still alive and in very good health. Only one of them has died thus far. Although that does mean that probably most of their 10 HP has been expended. At least I think it's 10 HP they have. Or it might be 7. I can't remember. There was a version of the game I played that had 10. I remember that. But yeah, the Nazgul coming in here. And Umbar's elite blob, it's going to be pretty difficult to stop. As well as all those dwarven reinforcements. But we shall see. Rune do have a lot of AP at their disposal. And if we go further down the line over here, you can see that these Naharu Royal Guard, they too are sort of suffering from the fact that they are kind of surrounded. Although those spears are pointing the wrong way. So we shall see. The Trebuchet, does it still have ammunition? Isengard, it looks like, have been pretty handily dealt with. And again, I think that comes from the fact that Eriador was able to send over several units of support. Because it was looking pretty grim for Arnor at one point. Their line was looking thin. You can see that there's just a mountain of bodies over here. What's going on down here, though? The Dwarven influence still has a big part to play, I'm sure. But the Khazad warriors are also being surrounded. Very efficient use of their sort of less elite units, the defenders here, to sort of surround the enemy. These Khazad warriors being dealt with, but there are more. I mean, there are dismounted Dunedain knights over here. Khazad orc hunters being committed to melee, putting their bows on their back and pulling out 2 hand axes. There's still... Well, there goes the runic general at the hands of what remains of those warlords of Umbar. Meanwhile, over here, the dwarven noblemen have been committed, and they are fighting against the dismounted Dunedain knights. And what's that in the background? The Khazad orc hunters and the Uruk-hai crossbows. The Khazad sentries have also moved forward. The dwarven infantry and the Umbar infantry might be too much for the defenders to deal with, but they can be pretty proud of the fact that they managed to disable the Mordor and Isengard aggressive pushes. But again, that aggression was needed because it will allow the more elite units to come into their own in this late stage. What is going on here? Some form of artillery fire. Well, what's going on here? Let's see these Dunedain Rangers and Dunedain Troll Slayers halting the march of these Harbingers. And the Troll Slayers are fully healthy, so they will be able to pretty handily deal with these Harbingers. There's a unit of 3 Moran-on Uruks, which will not be able to take the town centre on their own, I don't think. I mean, they're sort of trying to push through to the town centre, I see, which might actually do more damage to them in the end than is worth it. The ballista and the catapults both firing. Sapphire Bladesmen. Still a couple of them left alive. All of those missile units are still alive, but I'm not sure if it's worth going after them. I mean, getting a nice catapult hit on something like these Khazad-dûm Reclaimers might be the way to go. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, of course, pulling out a 2-handed axe. There goes the Mordor General, though. The Gamp Brim doing very, very well. The Gamp Brim is such a good unit for Rune in the current patch. There's still some Temple Guard alive. Meanwhile, what's going on here? We can see that Tundra's Fox moving in with a unit of Merchant Militia sweeping across the hills. Again, now it's time for the defenders to start feeling the squeeze and try and be surrounded. You can see that while the Mordor General did fall, these Gamp Brim are ultimately going to lose. Simply too many elites. And of course this wasn't a scenario, so people were able to pick their armies. And again, I think that early on, that Trebuchet could have been used to devastating effect on Umbar. Especially seeing as Umbar was pretty content to sit back. And again, I was actually worried that Umbar sitting back would be to their detriment. But in the end, they weren't punished for it, so it ended up being quite a clever thing to do. These Royal Guard, meanwhile, are just slowly being bled out, surrounded there. There are still some Dunedain Rangers. Hobbitry in arms. There's still hobbits left alive defending their homeland, fighting against Harbingers of Castamere, no less. And there are the Merchant Militia, but you can see that this death blob that is moving around might well prove to be the death of the defenders at this point, because I'm not sure they have too much in the way to answer it. They've got a couple of units of heavy infantry back here. The Trebuchet, which is still firing. I mean, they really need to get a nice hit, and they're not going for the right target. It's really unfortunate. They've got a huge blob of infantry here that the Trebuchet needs to be going after. I think they're going after the crossbows, but it's not worth going after the crossbows because even if you kill half the unit, they still have the ammunition of the full unit. If you're going to kill crossbows, you need to do it in melee. Any ranged unit, if you're going to kill them in this situation, you need to do it in melee. Now the Trebuchet's turning around. It might already be too late. There's Dunedain Rangers moving forward. These heavy spearmen, they're forming up a line. They're going to try and form up a line and try and get some close range hits. Is it going to be too late? We shall see. Those Forest Shell heavy swords are also coming. That was a nice hit. Nice hit on that blob. They're also shaken already. These are low morale units, so you could break them. Again, a decent hit there. Hitting some Castamere's Chosen and some Dwarven Miners. That Trebuchet is going to need to be used to its full capabilities here. Let's have a look here. So yeah, the attackers are actually starting to lose steam. They've only got 9% of their forces left, so this is going to be a very close one. You can actually see these Khazad-dûm Reclaimers still very much alive. They've used up all their ammo, but they're still a potent infantry unit. You can actually see as well that these Dwarven Noblemen being engaged by the Arnor Gate Guards. The Arnor Gate Guards need to... They really don't need to retreat because they're going to die on the retreat. They're Their spines are going to be severed by those dwarven axes.
Something changes in the course of battle, for defeat seems almost certain.
These dismounted Dunedain knights. Defeat seems certain, but they are able to halt the arrow fire from these Khazad orc hunters, if but for a moment. There's also some crossbows over here. These Dunedain rangers, who are standing there doing nothing, interestingly enough. So Isengard, I believe, have been destroyed, which is good for the defenders. And we also have some Khazad sentries coming over here. So Tundra's Fox and the dwarves, as well as the elites of Umbar. Really, this up here is where the battle could be won or lost, because I think down the hill there's not really going to be a concrete victor from down there. The gate guards are going to be difficult for the dwarves to force their way through. It's going to be a very closely fought fight, this. The trebuchet needs to get some more hits. The troll slayers are going to butcher these Belagir footmen. What are they going for? Going for those Belagir halberds? So they actually managed to hit one, unbelievably. And actually the merchant militia is broken. So the low morale...
Our cowardly foe runs. It's time to press the attack.
The low morale of a lot of Tundra's Fox's units could come back to bite him here, because his numbers were really needed to act as a cushion for these more elite Umbar units. And indeed, these Númenórean Shadow Guard are still alive. The Castamir's Chosen still going strong, and the Castamir's Chosen will cleave their way through Dunedain Rangers in melee. Lightly armoured targets are exactly the sort of thing that the Castamir units in general do very well with. Again, going for those Ironfoot crossbows, I would suggest it's probably more worth it going for these sentries, although the prospect of friendly fire maybe is putting them off a bit. Trying to go for those Ironfoot crossbowmen. The Arnor Gate Guards are actually retreating, I believe, to the town centre, which is an interesting choice. Because it does mean that they are essentially surrendering this lower engagement to the attackers. So the Dwarven Noblemen, there's still some Khazad sentries, so the Dwarves still have got a decent force down here, which the Gate Guards are going to need to sort of hold off in the town centre. The Band of Brass Archers are still alive. Amazingly.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Gotta love the hobbits. And then over here we can see that the heavy infantry from Eriador is being committed. So he's committed his heavy swords, he's committing his Greenway Guards, and I think he had a unit of spears as well. Yes, he did. They've actually managed to surround the Shadow Guard, but at this point the Castamir units they're going to need to deal with as quickly as they possibly can. And in fact, if we look over here, a depleted unit of dismounted Arthurdane Knights joining the fray. There's still quite a long way to go in this battle. I mean, we're not that far into the final 10,000 frames. There's 5% of the attackers remaining, 11% of the defenders remaining. It's exactly the sort of numbers where you expect a very close finish. The Ironfoot crossbows could still be very key, but oh, this is a good move. The Dunedain Troll Slayers, Fitz has managed to get into the crossbows with them. And honestly, dealing with these crossbows might well be the game winner, because these crossbows could have devastated the defensive line from afar. And ultimately it looks like they're going to be denied that. The Khazad-dûm Reclaimers are still a tough ask for a lot of these units to take on in melee. The Khazad sentries not really able to get their pikes down, and instead the Foreshell heavy swords are able to really get up into the faces of the dwarves. You can see these Greenway Guards sort of trying to slip around. That's something that the defenders really deserve a lot of credit for in this fight. They've really done a good job at surrounding the enemy when they needed to. Although it looks like the Greenway Guard's going to try and go for maybe the crossbows, or maybe not. But yeah, I give the defenders a lot of credit for sort of surrounding. Like, this is a perfect example of what the defenders have been very good at doing. They've isolated individual units, very strong units like the Naru Naharu Royal Guard, which are still fighting, and they've just managed to slowly bleed them by surrounding them. And it's interesting that they were able to do that as well, because Isengard and Mordor's initial pushes, they could well have blasted through the defences immediately and it would have been a very one-sided game, but the defenders stood firm in the face of all that. And it looks like they're going to win, because the Castamir's units really not going to be able to carry the day over here. The Trebuchet still has ammunition as well. Is he going to try a point-blank shot in there? That's likely to be more friendly fire than anything else. Actually, no, the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers are up here, going for the Trebuchet and going for the Band of Brass Archers, and of course the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers are easily going to win this fight. Tundra's Fox doing his best to pull victory from the jaws of defeat. These Khazad sentries. The gate guards, the sentries are not going to be able to beat the gate guards. There's also some Khazad Orc Hunters, the Troll Slayers, yeah. The defenders, I think, are going to take this one home. But never say never. There's always these merchant militia over here that came back from routing. Going to try and come to the aid of their allies, but I think it's going to be a little bit too late. Merchant militia just not heavy duty enough to turn this fight around. Foreshell heavy swords superior to them.
Our allies have fled the field like cowards.
I think that might be Rune. Rune have been completely destroyed. Ariador and Arnor. So they have redeemed themselves, Rune, in the eyes of the free people by helping defend Hobbiton. But yes, I remember back in Vanilla when Merchant Militia were probably the best mainline option you had as Ariador. How times have changed. Meanwhile, you can see that I think that the Ariador units have done very well for themselves in this fight. You know, the support they offered to the Runic and Arnor lines was absolutely key, especially against Isengard, because it looked like Isengard were going to handily win on that side when Arnor's line started to sort of really have chunks taken out of it. But then the Ariador support came, and together, the United Realms of Arnor were able to do a very good job. Now, they need to be careful here. They can't retreat too far out of the town centre, otherwise the dwarves will take the town centre. There's still some guards of Khazad-dûm left alive. Only 9 of them though. The trebuchets here. Khazad-dûm reclaimers.
Our men no longer
destroying the Bandabrass archers. Yeah, this is a bold move because the dwarves could move in and take the town centre, and they'd be well within their rights to here.
Our foe has taken control of the city.
Indeed they have. So this is a bit of a bold move. I mean, the trebuchet's firing, but the dwarves have to take this opportunity because I don't think they're going to win in open combat. There's the merchant militia routing, running for the hills. They need to be really careful here, the defenders. If they were to win based on this, they've thrown it away because the gate guards would have been able to hold that line long enough for support to come.
Lost control of the city.
How have they lost control, I wonder? Well, the gamble has paid off because that was a hugely important hit. Dane flattened by the trebuchet. An inglorious end to the king. Meanwhile, these Khazad-dûm reclaimers having to fight Troll Slayers. The Troll Slayers will be enough to give them pause, which means they're not going to be able to affect the fight that was happening up here. And indeed, Umbar is all but destroyed. Khazad Orc Hunters doing their best. So here we are at Bag End, and the dwarves are going to take it. The dwarves barging their way in once more, uninvited. And I imagine the dwarves have got pretty hefty appetites as well. So clearly the picnic tables are going to be ransacked. Meanwhile, I mean, they need to be really careful here, the defenders. They need to push down this hill with all haste, because they have only 2 minutes and 57 seconds remaining. And looking at the time, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, this was clearly something they planned because the gate guards moved back and then the trebuchet moved forward in tandem. The guards of Khazad-dûm are up here though now, interrupting the trebuchet crew while they try to do their work. Could this yet turn around? I don't know if Umbar have any forces left at all. They might have some left over here. They're still fighting with something over there, so I guess Umbar is pretty much out of it. But yeah, these dwarven noblemen. Khazad Orc Hunters, out of ammunition, being committed to melee. At this point it's just the dwarves trying to hold back the advance. Suddenly the dwarves have become the defenders, which is rather amusing. But the Dunedain Troll Slayers, I think they were able to defeat all of the Khazad-dûm reclaimers, which is going to be pretty crucial, because it does mean, of course, the Troll Slayers will be able to attack the Dwarven Noblemen from behind. The Dwarven Noblemen will have to engage them outside the town centre, I think. Actually, it looks like they're going to try and block their advance with the Khazad Orc Hunters. I mean, they're going to have... It's going to be a real case of egg on your face if the if the defenders end up losing this because of that retreat.
The enemy is no longer
they did it.
of the
Yeah.
city.
That retreat, they should have... What Tundra's Fox probably should have done there is just move the Dwarven Noblemen out to the edge of the town centre here and have them hold off the Troll Slayers. Because the Forestshell Heavy Swords were able to get into the town centre, and ultimately that means that the gamble will ultimately pay off. Very, very risky though. Over here we can see that these Guards of Khazad-dûm, victory seems certain. So strong they're able to take on the Trebuchet crew and the Forestshell Heavy Swords. Although actually the Band of Brass Archers are here as well. But yeah, very, very close battle in the end. I mean, if we look at the balance of power, it's still pretty close, honestly. There's 1% of the attackers remaining, 4% of the defenders remaining. And ultimately, the reason for the elongated fight will be this pike encounter. The Khazad sentries against the Gate Guards. The Gate Guards are actually all out of formation, which means the sentries should do okay for themselves there. Yeah, these Forestshell Heavy Swords, the heroes of the hour, because the Dwarves could have held the town centre there, I think. It was a very real possibility. And there you can see the Dunedain Troll Slayers in the background, cleaving their way through the Orc Hunters. They were never gonna stop them for long. Dunedain Troll Slayers, a very accomplished melee unit with those axes, and now they're going to be able to get a rear charge on what remains of the Dwarven Noblemen. And this is going to be all she wrote. Still just under 3,000 frames left to go though. The Trebuchet is now moving again. Dunedain Rangers. Trying to figure out what's actually left. I think the Dwarves are the only ones that are left. The Umbar player, I think, admitted defeat. Ultimately, he just didn't have enough to hang tough with the Dwarves. Those Umbar elites were doing damage though. The Trebuchet, it has to be said, is probably the MVP here. And who would have thought that? I mean, at the start, you know, Trebuchet is going to be very unpredictable. They can either be the MVPs or utterly useless. Defeat seems almost certain. Are you sure? Surely there's nothing left alive. Nope, those guys are broken and routing. Surely the why is it defeat seems certain for the defenders? Doesn't make any sense. Well, actually, what are these Gate Guards doing? There goes the Arnorian General. I mean, I'm extremely confused as to what these Arnor Gate Guards were doing. They've retreated from the front line twice, and they've taken so many losses on the retreat because of that. What is going on here? So could the Dwarves possibly bring it back? I mean, the Dunedain Troll Slayers have resorted to cycle charging on foot because the Dwarven Noblemen are just too tough. Can the Dwarves do it? Can that heavy armour pull them through? I mean, it's getting to the point where the Dwarven Noblemen could retake the town centre, which is interesting. The Trebuchet
fought long and are becoming tired.
Could the micro of those Gate Guards yet lose this? That would be a very, very strange thing indeed. There's still a lot of Forestshell units over here, and I would back them against the battered unit of Noblemen. And there are still Gate Guards alive. Are there Nazgul left alive?
For the moment, the fortune of battle goes our way. Let's pray
That's what it
remains
is.
as
There's
such.
3 Nazgul remaining. The Nazgul are still alive. Can the 9 ruin the Shire? Well, the 9 plus their banner carrier as it works in Total War, because there are of course 10 in the unit. That's unbelievable. The Nazgul could yet be the thing which turns this battle around. I mean, the Dwarven Noblemen are gone now. That's incredible. I mean, the Dunedain Troll Slayers are looking very worse for wear. There are still Khazad sentries left alive, although there are only 17 of them. Well, it was a brave effort, but ultimately I think that the Nazgul are not going to be able to pull this out. The Khazad sentries are not going to be able to survive under this level of scrutiny.
Flees the field. Pursue and run them down.
And there goes the dwarves. So the dwarves are routing. The Nazgul, the last ones left alive. That was a real roller coaster. The Nazgul proving their might. And I was right, we lost track of them completely for the whole battle, basically. And yet here they are at the end. The last units for the attackers left alive. But hey, the defenders have won. Despite their own best efforts to throw it away at the end. Amazing. Okay, let's go forward by ×6 to the end. And again, mostly Eriador forces left, in addition to a couple of Arnorians. So, having a look at the kill counts here, we can see that Arnor getting the most. Probably not too surprising there. Arnor tend to do very well in defensive sieges simply because of the amount of skirmishers they have available to them. The best attacker, Tundra's Fox, again, not too surprising. The dwarves do very well in offensive and defensive sieges. Isengard was very unfortunate, I think, because it looked like he was going to do very well for himself, but then, of course, he got collapsed on by Eriador and Arnor together, and ultimately I don't think that he had. He was the one that was most unsupported of all of the attackers here, and it showed because they were able to single him out pretty well. Umbar doing very well in the late game, those elites paying dividends in the end because they weren't sort of focused down. Mordor's aggression I liked as well. Let's have a look at the Eriador kills then. Dunedain Rangers again doing very well for themselves. Banderbrass Archers doing decently. Mounted Battle Ready Dunedain, those rear charges on Mordor were very significant. The Grey Company getting a huge amount of kills as well. And that's pretty much it. 400 kills on the Trebuchet though. I still think the Trebuchet was the MVP of this match. Very well done. Very fun match as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which I believe will be a scenario on Barad-dûr, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. And let me know, the frame rate was definitely improved as a result of me turning off the graphical improvement. If you would rather the graphical improvement, then let me know. But I personally think the improved frame rate is better. It's much more fun for me to commentate on when it's not so juddery as well. So yeah, I would appreciate your feedback.